and Claude, you've both got Sydney Science Trail,
Yep.
and I can read it normally. But looking at my own screen, it says it backwards. But I'm guessing that you guys see it the right way round?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I've got the same thing for mine.
Really? So you, Claude, you also see
Yeah.
your background backwards. What about you, Deborah?
No, but you've got to tick. So in the video settings,
Oh, yeah.
you've probably got mirror my video clicked.
Okay, video settings. Okay, then go down to mirror my video, you say.
Yeah. So you must have that ticked on.
Oh,
Turns
so-
mine around.
okay, so I'm going to untick it. Oh, wow. Now I'm the right way round. But am I still the right way round for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why would I want to be the wrong way round?
Yeah.
Why have they done this to us? Oh, this software is just so crazy. Have you guys been okay with getting NBN at home or internet access at home?
Yeah. Ours is really good.
What about you, Deborah? How do you support?
Yeah, we already had NBN, so that was good. Yeah.
How fast do you get at home? Or
Well, it does depend on how far away you are from the router. Yeah.
everybody hear that?
Yeah.
Big brother.
Wow. Okay, we've got 3 minutes to go.
Yeah,
Oh.
we're on cable here, so we get 100 megabit,
100 megabits are down, and how much up?
40 odd.
I paid for 40, but I'm only getting 20. Do you get genuine 40 up, do you?
36, 37 usually, yeah.
Really? I get 110 down and about 20 up. But I'm not game to talk to Optus because each time it takes 3 hours to get to somebody who doesn't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But what about you, Claude?
Yeah, I've got NPN. It's not too bad, but I had to upgrade to the fastest plan when we started to be, in lockdown, because with the, a number of people in the house and people doing, various courses and working from home, it was getting a bit limit.
Because I was having 100 down, but then 1.5 up. And then for some unknown reason, before I moved to NBN, Optus upgraded me to 200 down and 1.5 up. And 1.5 up didn't work because I was trying to do radio from home, but my daughter was also in classes at university from home, and my brother-in-law was... 1.5 is just not enough. But there's optic fibre up the corner from where I am. It's about 100 metres away, and I had a quote on how much it would cost to bring it to me: $17,000.
What order were you doing us? Were we introducing ourselves?
Don't know. What do you suggest? I'm happy to go with anything you suggest.
Oh no, I was just wanting to know what. Well, someone has to say the order.
Okay, so I'll go first. And so I'll do Richard first, and then Dr. Richard first, then Professor Deborah, and then Professor Claude. How about that?
Okay.
And it's so confusing that there's Richard Garrett and Deborah Richards. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got about 1 minute to go. I'm seeing my little clock that we're close to the top of the hour now. Okie dokie. 5 seconds to go. Here we go. Nice. Righty. Odie, and getting that bit of paper. And ready to roll. And we've hit. Well, hello everybody, and we're live. I think we're live. Is there any way of finding out we're live? I guess we are. There's Deborah. Look, hello everybody. We're talking to individuals and schools, a couple of hundred of you around the country and around the world. So welcome to individuals and to schools to the very first panel of the Sydney Science Trail, the big questions of science. So thank you very much for joining us. I'm Dr. Karl, and I'll be your host for our next 40 minutes or so. Of course, I'd like to start off by paying respect to the first peoples of this nation and their custodianship of the land and the sea and the sky, and acknowledge them as the first scientists of these lands. Read the book Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe. And my son and son-in-law and daughter-in-law have just come back from a little holiday where they went to see one of the oldest built things on the planet, the Brewarrina fish traps, well over 30,000 years old. And they ran for 30,000 years. Oh my God. So I respect them. This country was and always will be Aboriginal land. Few housekeeping items before we get started. So students, if you've got any questions during our session, please ask your teacher to put them in the Q&A and we'll try and get to as many of them as possible. And this session is being recorded, but it's not you guys, it's only us. That's our big ego. And speaking of the panelists, I'll now start off, and there's 4 of them. So I'll just start with the very first one, Dr. Richard Garrett, and you work at ANSTO, A-N-S-T-O. Can you tell the students and the audience about that, Dr. Richard?
Sure. Good morning, Carl. So yes, I work at ANSTO. That stands for the Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation. So that's primarily located in the south of Sydney at the Lucas Heights Laboratory, but we also have campuses in town at Camperdown and in Melbourne. So my main job at the moment is coordinating our involvement with some of the big science projects in Australia and around the world. Things like our underground physics laboratory that we're collaborating on, which is being built at 1 kilometre down a gold mine in Victoria to search for dark matter, and the nuclear fusion ITER experiment in France, for example. I guess I had a traditional route into science in my career. I was always interested in science in high school and studied physics in university, did a PhD in physics, and then headed off to the United States, where I worked for a few years at a synchrotron there. That's a big electron accelerator that produces extremely intense X-ray beams. And I returned to Australia to work in that same synchrotron field and was involved in the construction and funding of the Australian synchrotron, which is located in Melbourne, which is ANSTO's Melbourne campus. So we operate that facility. So that's really my career in a nutshell.
So next we have Professor Deborah Richards from Macquarie University, who's blended a whole bunch of topics into a field that probably didn't exist too many years ago. And now you're in, Professor Deborah, in artificial intelligence, ethics and robotics. And how on earth do you get into such a field? Please let me welcome Professor Deborah Richards from Macquarie University.
Yes, hello, Carl, and everyone else. Yeah, well, I certainly didn't come there directly, but let me first just say something about some of the things that I'm interested in and have been doing. So I do quite a lot of projects involving virtual reality and games technology, but I am primarily an artificial intelligence researcher and using those technologies to create virtual worlds. So I was working with a virtual world called Amosa Virtual World, which had intelligent animals in it that lived in predator-prey relationships. You could talk to the biologists and the climatologists and different people to find out why certain animals were dying. So it was a place you could go and visit. And I was working on training simulations and those sorts of things. But I had a sabbatical, a study period at the Children's Hospital at Westmead in 2014. And I was just staggered to find out that there were kids there who had got a kidney transplant. Obviously, were going to die otherwise. But then because they didn't follow their treatments, they ended up dying because they didn't follow them. And that just floored me. And that's when I really started in an area of intelligent virtual agents, virtual humans who you can talk with. They're empowering. They help you think through what you're doing and why you're doing it. So that's really my passion now. I'm sure I'll talk a little bit more about some of those examples. So how did I get here? Certainly not traditionally. I I grew up in Housing Commission with a mentally ill mother. I left home when I was 17. After I finished the HSC, I sort of within a week was out the door. I started working in the bank, but in 1980, I joined the Computer Bureau. Back then, even large organisations didn't have their own IT. And well, can I say I'd never looked back? I love the slogan, which was of the Australian Computer Society Foundation, which was called Start Here, Go Anywhere. And I just love it. And IT really is everything. I just challenge people to say what is not IT, what cannot be furthered and improve lives through IT. So I think it was, about 85, I did a course at TAFE because I realised I always ended up at the bottom if I didn't have some qualifications. Even if I worked my way up, I then bit the bullet and did distance education to get a bachelor, actually of business. I had a couple of kids during that time. That was really tough because I was working full time. I was studying, full time was 4 units, part time was 2 units. I was doing 3 units, and had 2 kids as well. Had a break, a break from studying, let me say, not from everything else. And then later did a Master of Applied Science, as well as working. I had my 3rd child during that time. And then I did a PhD, another year in industry. And then I joined Macquarie University in 99. So not the direct path to get there, and worked my way up from a lecturer now to a professor. That's how I got here. Just a tip, you don't have to do it the hard way. I recommend doing your study first and family and stuff after, but anyway, yeah.
Wow, what an inspiring pathway. Look, thank you, Professor Deborah. And Professor Claude Roux, R-O-U-X, I don't know how you pronounce the X. You're from Switzerland, so I'm guessing you speak a bunch of languages. And at the moment you're at UTS. And what are you a professor of there, Professor?
Yeah, hello, Carl, and hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Professor of Forensic Science and the Director of the Center for Forensic Science at UTS. Which is our research strength. So we do a whole bunch of research in forensic science. I think most people would have a kind of an idea of what forensic science is by watching CSI, Bones, and all these TV shows. Now, what I would say is the reality is quite different, but it's nevertheless very inspiring and exciting. So I grew up in Switzerland, as you mentioned, and when I was in high school, I was very keen on science and technology. But at the same time, I started to be interested in law, and at some stage I contemplated being a lawyer, and then I thought it might be a bit, too boring, and no offense to our lawyer friends. But I found that in the city I was in, there was the first school of forensic science at the university that had been created in 1909. So a big profile, and then I started my study there, undergraduate. Then I did a PhD. And trying to understand the meaning of transfer of microtraces and specifically fibers. So what happened when people have a contact between each other or contact between their garment and a car seat, and you find fibers, and what does it mean, and things like that. And when I was at the end of my PhD, and it was in 96, long time, there was an ad for a lecturer at the University of Technology in Sydney. And it was only for 3 years at the time. So I thought I have nothing to lose. So I tried to go there, and I applied. It was kind of almost a joke or a game. And then I got the job. And not only I did the whole 3 years, but then I did my whole career. So, 24 years later, I'm here. I've got Aussie kids, and I'm, Professor of Forensic Science at UTS. I've been doing a lot of research in all sorts of areas of forensic science, but to give you a bit of an idea, developing new method for fingerprint detection, to trying to understand the meaning of transfer of different types of traces, working on the way how we can improve the application of science for the criminal justice system and in policing. So I think that the whole main thread for me has been, it's not science for science, it's really science for society. And it's a fantastic area because you touch a bit of everything in science, and you need a very critical mind and a very strong scientific mind and philosophies behind. And I think that's very important in this day and age. I think scientists have kind of lost a lot of their influence in identifying questions for society and trying to bring answers. And I'm quite passionate about that.
Wow. And apparently you've got a body farm as well.
Yes, that's true. So at UTS we're not supposed to call it Body Farm.
Oh, sorry. What's the official name?
You've said it. I'll call it Body Farm. Yes, there is a whole series of research going on trying to understand what happens to bodies when when they decompose, and what kind of volatile compounds can be detected, and so on.
Wow. Okay, look, we've got a bit of an intro. In my case, I started off at school doing physics and maths, and then working at the steelworks. And then I went to New Guinea to do research into hair and wool, and then dropped out to become a filmmaker and made some of the first MTV videos in Australia, and also set up Australia's first cable TV network at Nimbin, at the Nimbin Arts Festival in the early 70s. And then became a car mechanic as well, and a taxi driver, and drove 400,000 kilometres, and then drifted into working as a scientific officer in the hospital, sliding pipes into people's hearts to measure blood flow, and then drifted from that into designing and building a machine for Fred Hollows to pick up electrical signals off the human retina to diagnose certain types of eye disease. And then from that went into medicine and surgery, but then dropped out to start up Quantum on ABC TV, and then went back into medicine, worked at the Kids Hospital for a couple of years, and then test drove four-wheel drives around Australia. I've been through 15 of the 17 deserts in Australia, and do radio and books, and I've got no idea how I got here. I guess if you do a Venn diagram of all my different careers, they don't overlap, so therefore I don't exist. But more importantly, you exist, Dr. Richard, Professor Deborah and Professor Claude, and we have a list of questions. And our first question, our first topic we should go for is about science and the media. Who wants to start? Professor Deborah? Science and the media, what are you thinking?
Okay, well, it's very important to get the knowledge out there and to let others know. There's no point spending time, money, effort into discovering new knowledge, and in fact you don't move forward if you don't disseminate it and build on it. That's what a PhD, that's what research is all about, building on knowledge. I actually met you a long time ago. I'm exaggerating a little bit. I think it was 2005, it would have been. I had an ABC Science Media Fellowship.
Oh.
Yeah, back in the day. And so I spent 6 weeks in Harris Street there. And yeah, so I think media is really important for the sciences, absolutely. And I've taken away from that time, the importance of the hook and the story. I still on my website have some of the stories that were created during that time. I actually kept doing work with the ABC for at least 6 months after that, working with different people there. Yeah.
Because you're right about it has to go out there, but the trouble is, in the same way that you do not expect a carpenter to also be a chef, why would you expect a scientist to be a journalist? And that's why people like me get a job. Claude, Richard, who wants to dive in next?
Yeah, I think telling people what we do and pitching at a level they can understand is really vital. It's I'm sure we've all had the situation of someone asking what we do, and within about 5 seconds their eyes glaze over. So trying to pitch it at a level where people can understand why we're excited is important. And projects like the Dark Matter project is a really good example. I mean, that's probably the biggest mystery in physics at the moment, in astrophysics, is what is this dark matter that makes up over 80% of the universe? And we really have no idea. And it's just, there's an international effort all around the world building experiments trying to find what the nature of this mysterious matter is.
And the last time we had a big mystery like that was back in the early 1900s, when we couldn't work out how the sun kept on burning. And if the sun was made of something just loaded with energy, like coal, it would have run out of fuel in a few million years. And yet the geologists were saying, look, the Earth is many, many millions of years old, much older than just a few million years. And the mystery was solved by radioactivity, and we've got X-rays and computers and quantum mechanics and smartphones, all because we solved the mystery of how the sun was burning. So who knows what will come out of solving dark matter? And Professor Claude?
Yeah, no, look, I fully agree with everything that has been said before. I mean, I'm kind of lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, because I'm working in a field where communication is absolutely crucial. Because if you are a forensic scientist, you have a good chance to end up in court at some stage to give evidence, and you have to be able to give your results and the meaning of your findings to 12 people who have absolutely no idea about science, and more importantly, maybe they even don't want to be there and they are bored in the first place. So it's kind of the ultimate educational game, if you want. So definitely, communication is very important. I feel scientists have been probably not understood enough for many, many years. And you're right, Carl. I mean, some very, very big questions can be quite complex, but with the right people, we can probably distill them down to a level where people can start understanding how it works.
And for the panel in general, any comments on fake science news?
It is amazing how this gets traction sometimes. Some of these things that are very quickly discredited scientifically still hang around for decades.
I can't get the one where people reckon that the Earth is flat and that we didn't go to the moon, Anybody else on fake science?
I think what it highlights is that with technology, there's always a good and a bad side. Things can be used for good and for bad. And that's why it's so important that we understand, how technology can be used, and as a society decide what is appropriate use of it.
So certainly if you go on to iView on Catch Up and watch the series Operation Buffalo, you'll be surprised to realise that the British exploded many atom bombs and hydrogen bombs on Australian soil, and the radiation from these blasts was carried by the wind onto various cities such as Sydney and Melbourne and Adelaide, and people died, and it was all covered up by the government back then, Menzies, and so the government has lied to us in the past. So this whole fake news is tricky, isn't it? Okay, let's try something else. AI, robotics, ethics, cybersecurity. Okay, who wants to put their hand up for that?
Well, I guess I better do that since that's my field. Okay, well, is there a particular question around that? I guess maybe I'll take the ethics angle.
Yeah. If I can just say one thing, I was absolutely astonished when you said, and I'm not doubting you, that on one hand, at the kids' hospital, a very complex and expensive, but that doesn't matter, complex operation was done, and the operation to transplant a kidney into a child was done successfully, and then the communications broke down and the kid died when they didn't have to. Can you take it away from there?
Yeah. So that motivated me to read, look at the literature. This is what we as researchers do. And as particularly as an AI researcher, look at other fields. So I was looking now in the medical, in the psychology literature, and finding that, why did young people, why would that happen? And a whole lot of reasons. I mean, it's very complex psychosocial problem, issues that they have. A key thing is young people saying they just want to be normal, okay? And if they can't be normal, then they don't really care, whether they're getting better or not. It can be simple things which are still hard to get around, such as, the medication tastes disgusting, or they don't, feel well after the treatments. Sometimes as simple as forgetting to do it. But most of the real sticking points are, I guess, motivation, feeling that other people care. There's often power struggles with parents, over who's, following a treatment plan. There's concerns that parents or medical professionals don't care. So the young person feels they have no one to talk to. Okay, and so this is where this virtual character comes in, because it can ask you questions. Well, why aren't you following that treatment? And we're not using natural language. We're using conversational language that people would understand. But when I mention natural language, then I don't mean that the person doesn't just speak to it and it generates language and it speaks back to you. We do have it already scripted because we don't want to take any risks, particularly if we're dealing with mental health or health, any sort of health. There's quite a lot of articles around that you can read, which are quite scary, about advice that, is given by systems that, it might be fine to get directions to purchase products, but not to make medical and health decisions. As an example, a recent example, a system had been created based on that people sometimes suffer from depression because they're very negative. They see, or they exaggerate things. Okay, so say, oh, everything bad happens to me, nothing good ever happens, that always goes wrong. And so a system had been created based on that psychological theory. Okay, so someone's talking to a chatbot and the chatbot says, how are you? And they say, oh, not too good. A close friend of mine just passed away. But because, and then what the chatbot said was, oh, do you think you're overreacting? So it was completely inappropriate for that context. And often when medical advice is recommended, they had a whole lot of medical professionals review the advice that was given. And I think it was like 30% of the time, it was actually life-threatening if you followed that. So anyway, I'm not using natural language. Instead, there are options. And so for example, if you ask the question, why aren't you taking that medication? It can be things like, are you taking it? No, I keep forgetting. No, I don't like the taste of it. No, I don't think it helps me. No, my friend told me it was bad for me. So it's a way of the person reflecting, well, why am I doing this or aren't I doing that? And what we found, we actually added this avatar. So this was starting back in 2014, added an avatar that talked about treatments that were being given to patients on the waiting list who weren't following their treatments. Okay, 50% of the time, people do what they're recommended to do, like flip a coin. Humans don't like to be told what to do. So the important thing is to build a working alliance, like a bond and understanding what the person's trying to achieve. And that adherence went up to 88%. And we had 1/3 of patients not actually needing to see the specialist anymore, and others requiring less appointments. So yeah, great, great improvements in adherence. And of course, greater adherence leads to greater health outcomes as well.
Wow. So it looks like you're overcoming some of the challenges of, I guess, miscommunication. And in a specific area here, just the healthcare system, even more specific with regard to the kids' hospital.
Yeah, It's more than, well, communication is very complex, isn't it? So it's not just about information, because we had all the fact sheets, all the information, and that still was 50, it was just 50%. But it's when you can talk it through, and when you can talk it through where someone is understanding, what are you trying to achieve? What do you believe or think about things? And then when the avatar, you know, the character understands you, so this is where the artificial intelligence comes in. It has a model of that human, understanding their medical condition, understanding whether they, you know, like to eat these sorts of things or not. So when it makes a recommendation, it's actually providing explanations and recommendations that are relevant for that individual.
Wow.
And that's what makes the difference.
So many challenges. Richard, Claude?
Yeah, I would have a couple of comments there. I mean, both two words really are pretty much music to my ears here. Is really AI and cybersecurity from what you mentioned before. So really AI, just to keep going from what Deborah said, you know, in our field in forensic science, you know, there at some stage there is a human interpretation. So whether it's to say that this fingerprint, you know, somehow comes from that finger, or that paint chip, you know, could come from that car, and I'm using very simple wording here. But how do you get to that point? How do you interpret, and what can you actually say? And because of that human intervention, there is a bit of subjectivity. We all come with our own biases and experience and everything. So it's been pretty much proposed now for a number of years that the way to go is to go more and more towards AI, to try to remove the human more and more. And I think it's there is a balancing act here, because I think definitely, you know, it's a field which will greatly improve different aspects of our work in the future. But in the same time, at least for us, it shouldn't be seen as the magic bullet, because it's only as good as the data you put in the first place. So it's kind of a rubbish in, rubbish out. And the critical thinking of the scientist is probably even more important in such situation. So that's about AI. Cybersecurity is more to say that in our field, digital transformation has completely revolutionized everything we do. Both in terms of tools that are available now to forensic scientists and people working in that area, and also the type of criminal activity and deviant behavior we see, because, you know, simply it's going both ways, as Deborah said. You know, the same methods and tools can be used on, you know, for good or for bad. So I think that's a big challenge for us, this digital transformation. Because the number of traces and the variety of traces we receive in forensic science has completely exploded. And just imagine when you go to work in the morning, so all your actions, you leave traces of yourself, so that can be physical or that can be digital. So when you do the sum of all that, you know, your footprint is absolutely huge. And how do we manage that, and what can we do, and what's the ethics behind? What's ethically normal or acceptable for society? I mean, these are very challenging questions.
Wow. So basically privacy is gone, and we've always leaving behind us, not just the digital footprint, our phone broadcasting where we are and recording our conversations, but the physical footprint of leaving DNA everywhere. Richard?
Yeah, similarly, I think AI is increasingly important. The amount of data that's being generated these days is just enormous. Our synchrotron in Melbourne can easily generate several terabytes in a day. And something like the CERN Large Hadron Collider is even worse. There's huge data coming out when they're running. That people make the analogy of trying to drink from a fire hose. So we need AI to reduce that data into something manageable that we can sensibly analyze. So it's just invading all the research fields.
And Deborah?
I just want to make sure, I want to make a point regarding AI and the role of humans in that. And I strongly believe that humans must always be part of the loop, in the loop, on the loop. And because there is so many issues around potential bias. Okay, so when we have the data, if the data doesn't represent the whole of the population, and unfortunately, when we look at a lot of data, it often doesn't represent the genders equally, and various different groups. So also the ethical side to the virtual characters that I use, because they build a relationship with the human, and that's part of how they work. We need to be careful, not just thinking of AI as, oh, it's all data and machine learning, which seems a long way off, which has got nothing to do with relationships. I don't mean a long way off, it's happening now, but it doesn't affect the core parts of our society and relationships. But technology and these artificial humans are playing some of those roles, playing the roles of teachers, playing the roles of counselors and these sorts of things. So we do need to get that balance right. But in the work that I do, and most, what I would say, responsible scientists, is that technology is being used to point people to humans, to provide services that humans can't provide at 2 a.m. They can't provide without, humans are biased as well. So the biases that we have in our data are the biases that we have in our society. So these characters have actually been used to help train medical doctors to work with virtual patients. And a study that was done in the US, where the virtual patients had African-American appearance or other appearances, actually helped to reveal to these trainees that they had biases against people with that skin color. They actually gave them less information, spent less time with them, and when asked later, oh, I could see they weren't paying attention, but in fact, and they weren't going to do it. And then it turned out the only thing that was different was the skin color. So these AI, can also be used as a way for our society to reflect on itself and humans to do things better. So it's not just about technology taking things away from humans or replacing humans.
Now it's time to go for the Q&A. And here's a question: how important is curiosity in being a scientist and thinking about big science questions, bearing in mind we've got 6 minutes to go? There's 3 of us, 4 of us, and there's a bunch of people. Question: how important is curiosity in being a scientist and thinking about big science questions? Off you go. Who starts?
I can start. I think it's fundamental. I mean, we're all attracted into science because we're curious about how things work, why things happen the way they are, how the universe operates, how we as people function, what's the underlying mechanism of how we're alive down to the molecular level. I think all levels of science depend on curiosity.
Next.
Yeah, I would completely agree, and I think I would even go further. I think not only we need curiosity in science, but we also need creativity and imagination, because quite often people may think that science is the boring stuff, very irrational and that sort of thing, and you've got the creative arts and humanities on the other side. But actually, the reality is much more complex than that, and we need creativity and imagination in science as well. Otherwise, we are just repeating the same thing over and over, and there is no creation of knowledge. So a very simple example in my field, in forensic science, when people go to a crime scene, it's not only looking at various traces they can observe or see at the crime scene. It's also trying to imagine what could have happened and trying to be creative about what kind of traces could be there if such and such story is correct. So yeah, there is a big part of imagination in any scientific endeavor, really.
And Deborah?
I think curiosity is so important that I have spent many years that the Emosa Virtual World I mentioned is all about science inquiry and helping. This is a secondary high school project that recognised that students often didn't know how to do science inquiry. In fact, they often, particularly at selective schools, this was an interesting finding, that they thought that science was theoretical. And then when they were using our virtual world, they go, oh, actually science has a lot of hands-on aspects to it as well. And I found that quite shocking that, that it wasn't actually understood, because it's all about hands-on and thinking. And I've got currently a PhD student whose focus is on curiosity. So that's a very interesting thing, and particularly how to encourage curiosity. And we want to particularly focus on making sure that, again, genders are represented to encourage a range of different people to be interested and to seek answers to things. But
I do have that saying in physics that it's not the answer that gets you the Nobel Prize, it's the question. Now, I've only got a few more minutes to go. And before the question, here's some thinking time for you panellists. What are you most excited about in the future of science? There's a question here from group 5 and 6 students from Mayfield East, and I'll just answer that one quickly to get out of the way. How deep is the ocean? And do we have the technology to know the answer? It's about 11 and a bit kilometres. It's in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Asia. It's called the Marianas Trench, but it's only deep because the Earth is spinning. Because if the Earth were to stop spinning, the water that's all piled up at the equator would go away back towards the poles in each direction. The ocean levels would drop by 5.5 kilometres, and there's no part of the ocean on the equator that's 5.5 kilometres deep. So we'd end up with a continent around the Earth on the equator, and we'd have a moderately deep ocean, a bunch of oceans in the north, but a very big ocean in the south. There you are. Okay, panellists, what are you most excited about in the future of science? And we've got about 3 minutes in total, so about maybe 1 minute each. Who wants to start? Richard, you start?
Okay. I am, I guess, most excited about our ability to solve the big questions. What are we going to do for energy to stop emissions? So can we improve how we use our renewables? Can we get a form of nuclear energy like fusion that's safe, not emitting, and that can give us our baseload power? And some of these really big questions of the universe. The question of things like dark matter, dark energy, what's really understand the fundamentals of where we are, because that fundamental science in a decade or 2 or 3 turns into applications. It's really hard to predict when we're doing fundamental science, but if we turn off that fundamental science tap, then we're not going to get any good new applications.
And Richard, in the mobile phone, there are 7 amazing technologies, each of which was funded as pure and totally useless research by a government organisation. So you don't know where the research will take you. Professor Deborah, what are you excited about for the future?
I think technology, so it's so pervasive. I think it will, I mean, it has already completely transformed our society. I think, you know, in the current context of COVID-19, it is really wonderful to see how science has come to the fore in every way you can imagine, from like telehealth. So it's not just about looking for a vaccine, okay? That's an obvious one, and that's, you know, obviously very important. But there's a lot of research happening in transforming our whole society. COVID, as terrible as this situation is, it has made a lot of change happen. And that change is very much being driven by science and technology and enabling those things. So as an AI researcher, I'm really excited that AI is a positive thing again. It was sort of put in the background and as if it wasn't going anywhere. But I think that the sky's the limit. And as Richard said, I think the really big questions that we have, we're close to being able to work together, okay? The sciences, well, not just the sciences, the social sciences, the humanities, arts, we can all get together and solve these problems.
And Professor Claude, what excites you about the future of science?
Yeah, I mean, really the same. I think the beauty now is that the time of the scientist, working by himself or herself in a lab, it's gone. So it's all really big team, international collaborations, interdisciplinary, and by doing that, and of course it's facilitated by technology, and by doing that we can really tackle all these big questions. And to me, I'm fascinated by the fact that science can really help society to be a better society, and it's not only a question of physical well-being, but we're also talking about public health. We're also talking about fairness, being living in a fairer society, and I think the next big thing is really this connection between what we call hard science and humanities. And I think that's more and more important, and it's pretty much where we are going in many fields of science.
And I'll give my 2 cents worth. 3 things. Firstly, we can not only stop global warming, we can reverse it. Go to the website drawdown.org, DRAWDOWN.org. Secondly, students, the people watching, you are the most intelligent people in the history of the human race. It's called the Flynn effect, where the IQ goes up by 9 IQ points every generation. And we've been measuring this beginning in American military recruits in 1932. 9 IQ points per generation. And third good point is you are living in the most peaceful time ever in the history of the human race. It might not sound like that, but here's an example. People say the Second World War was the most bloody war on a percentage basis ever in the history of the human race. But no, if you go back to 755 AD, in that year, the Chinese emperor put down the An Lushan revolt by killing 1 in every 3 people in China, 1 in every 6 people in the whole world. In the 1300s, Genghis Khan killed 1 in every 9 humans alive. Second World War killed 1 in every 44. Still terrible, going down. Read the book, The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker, or Factfulness by Hans Rosling. So we'll just finish off here. So people will want to get in contact with you. So Richard, how can people get in contact with you, follow you, Twitter, Facebook? What's the best way? Ring you up at ANSTO. What's the best way, Richard?
Find me at ANSTO. If you go to www.ansto.gov.au and look for me, you can find my details.
And Professor Deborah, how can people follow you on Twitter, or what's the best way you have?
Probably, send me an email is probably the best way. Yeah, you can find what I've been up to on my website. I think if you type in Deborah Richards, and certainly if you add Macquarie University, you'll find me.
Okay, and then finally, Professor Claude.
Yeah, the same thing. I mean, email me. It's probably the best thing. I mean, we've got a forensic website, forensics.uts.edu.au, or we've got a Twitter, CFS_UTS. But yeah, for direct access, probably email is best.
Okay, look, thank you very much, fellow panelists, although you did all the hard work. Thank you, Dr. Richard, Professor Deborah, and Professor Claude, and especially thank you to the audience and to Tori Tasker and Jacob and Bonnie and Christian for making it all work seamlessly behind the scenes. This was the first one we did, and of course the second one will be even better, but the first one was fantastic. Look, thank you very much, and I'll say bye-bye all, and thank you.
Bye.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
See ya.